This episode of the BeanCast is brought to you by Flava Naturals. See for yourself what a super burst of flavanols can do for your brain and physical health. Go to flavanaturals.com and use the offer code BOB for 20% off your first order. Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Transcription services provided by transcribeme.com. Visit them on the web at transcribeme.com/beancast for up to 25% off. That's transcribeme.com. Episode 495, Blocking the Blockchain. For Monday, May 14th, 2018. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norp. Thanks for joining us. If you listen to the press, you'd think widespread use of blockchain solutions is a foregone conclusion. And yet, besides the known issues, there are also indications that the underlying tech may not be as reliable as we believe. Should we trust it? We'll discuss. Also, the rising creation of virtual influencers, the next big advancement in voice platforms, the rise and fall of clout, plus this week's Ad Fail 5. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the Chief Strategy Officer at Roxa, Mr. Ian Baer is here. Hi, Ian.
Hi, hello, everyone.
Now, also with us, we have the founder of the Antipodean Advertising Technology and Production Consultant, Ms. Michelle Excell. Hi, Michelle.
Hey, Bob. Good to be back.
Glad to have you with us. And finally, we have a co-founder of the Social Media Club, adjunct professor in Columbia's master's program in nonprofit management, Mr. Howard Greenstein. Hi, Howard.
Hi, Bob. Hi, everybody. How are you tonight?
Doing well. Hey, we've got a topic that I think is just perfect for this particular group because I know you all have a little bit of technology mindedness and you're going to be able to delve into this in an interesting way. I'm hoping, because it's a tough technology concept. Blockchain enthusiasts have always seemed to be hyping the trust aspects of the technology. And in truth, the decentralized structure of a blockchain solution should offer a foolproof means of ensuring the legitimacy of any transaction, from a purchase to a vote to an ad that's served to an individual. And yet, even the granddaddy cryptocurrencies don't rely entirely on the system itself to ensure transactional legitimacy. They employ third-party trusted partners to ensure that fraud is not a part of the picture. So, Michelle, are there flaws to the blockchain solutions that people are now considering? And if so, what does it mean for the future of the tech? What's your opinion personally, first, before you get into all this, what's your opinion personally about crypto and about the blockchain in particular?
I'm glad you asked that first. My opinion is that I feel woefully uneducated about this still, even though it's been around for quite some time now.
I know what you mean, because out of all my friends, I'm probably the most knowledgeable, and this is my immediate circle of friends, I'm probably the most knowledgeable person I've met on this subject, and I am completely unknowledgeable on this subject. I mean, I know a lot about the limitations and the promises, but I still couldn't tell you how the blockchain actually works. I'm not a tech guy.
I have watched so many instructional videos. I have taken the opportunity to ask every single one of my friends who's even mentioned that they know anything about it every single time we meet. And I feel like something hasn't quite clicked yet that's going to enlighten me. But I've watched a couple of really good videos recently. Actually, I don't know if anyone on this session went to Collision conference. It was in New Orleans recently. Collision and Web Summit, which is in Lisbon every year, are run by the same company. And I went to Web Summit in November. I was watching a really great video from Collision this morning that was trying to, in layman's terms, explain some of what you're talking about with this question that you've raised about the is it fundamentally flawed? Let's put it that way.
Right.
And I'm going to relay as much as I can, even further in layman's terms, about what I grasped from this video, which is blockchain in and of itself is the underlying technology, this chain, but there are a lot of other transactions that happen around it to support transactions. There are a lot of other things that happen around it to support transactions. And that's, accessing your wallet, actually, authorizing transactions. And that's what is exposing a lot of vulnerabilities. And the speaker likened it to when we added SSL to HTTP, where we added secure certificates to the web and to web pages and to transactions that happen on those web pages, or when we realized that we needed additional security on Wi-Fi after we launched Wi-Fi. And so how he was describing it was really educational to me, because he was explaining where some of these vulnerabilities were and where some of these hacks were taking place. And there were some things like, when people were accessing their wallets in the same way that people can steal your identity, people were able to break in that way and access your wallet, take your wallet, or, attack during some of the mining practices. There was an instance where a particular group of people were able to mine 100 times faster than should have been humanly possible. And so they were able to, in a very short space of time, take a lot more money from that particular currency. So I think that made sense to me. It made sense to me that we've launched something new and it's still relative early days, and that we need to get better at understanding all of the different ways and things that support blockchain technologies, whether it's a currency or just a non-currency.
The article I read was just filled with stuff that made me think for a second time about this particular technology and made me rethink the way that I'm embracing it, because I've been a big fan of the trust element inherent in the blockchain. Yes, there is some technical problems with the fact that for the blockchain to work, every single computer in the chain needs to have the exact same file, and the more transactions that you add to that file, the bigger that file gets, and it just slows the system down. That's a fundamental.
Yeah, we've talked about that scalability before.
Right. There's a fundamental problem with it, but I think the bigger issues were about the contracts. That for a contract to get done, even the best of the exchanges don't work with these electronic contracts. They do brokered transactions. They put humans in the mix because they don't trust the system to work as advertised. And I think one of the, when you talk to a blockchain enthusiast, the first thing that they say, the first thing they get excited about is all the different use cases, one of them being voting. And this article was pointing out that it really doesn't stop a government from adding lots of false voting records and populating the entire blockchain with lots of false voting records. And it doesn't stop individuals from, potentially stealing identities and going out and with someone else's password voting in their name. I mean, there are so many different problems inherent with the technology that enthusiasts are not really addressing when they talk about it. Howard, I think you were going to say something.
Bob?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not magic fairy dust, right? It's a database, effectively. It's a three-part, almost like a three-part accounting system where you have two-part accounting where you journal something back. If you've done the wrong thing, you don't just delete a transaction. You reverse it, or you accrue, or you do things like that. This is a third way of doing it, which is where the transactions are all out in public. And that's a great thing. It's really positive, and there are specific tech solutions like voting where if you knew that everybody had a particular identity and you could verify everybody's identity, they could vote, and no one could take back the vote and say, oh, I didn't vote that way, because you can cryptographically prove, you can mathematically calculate that Bob voted this way because could only have come from Bob's ID from Bob's computer. The problem is, just like any other computer system in the world, garbage in, garbage out. So if Michelle wanted to fake that Bob and Ian's votes were for candidate X instead of candidate Y, and she had access to their systems or somehow hacked their systems, it would definitely look like it came from that person, from that identity, from that computer, but it doesn't mean it's the right vote. I heard another example recently. Someone wanted to document child soldiers on a blockchain. And I said, well, that's great. That means that, once you put that person's name in, they can never grow out of having been kidnapped and forced to be a child soldier. That sort of stain on their life will follow them for the rest of their lives. There are lots of reasons to use blockchains, but it's not the solution for everything. Just like in 1996, creating a web page wasn't the solution for everything.
Howard, let me stop you for a second, because what you said here also raises red flags in terms of the right to be forgotten, which is a European law. I mean, does
Correct.
the blockchain actually run afoul of European law in some instances, because there's always going to be a record of every transaction, and there is no way for you to be forgotten in the blockchain. That is
really true. The other thing that I think, there's not a lot of, or I haven't seen a lot of, and I will admit, like Michelle, that I spent a lot of time reading about this, but I cannot call myself anything other than a somewhat informed novice. I don't know how you take back mistakes. And we've seen lots of instances where Bitcoins, for example, have been stolen, or there was this Ethereum hack where someone created a smart contract and managed to steal a bunch of money. And it was not really a hack. It was they followed the rules. They created a thing that said, transfer me money. And the system said, yeah, this is a valid thing. I'm going to do that. I'm going to transfer you the money. And they actually had to write something to try to get the money back for people. This sort of permanence is a great idea until someone makes a mistake. And frankly, we're all human except for the computers. And there are going to be a lot of mistakes. I'm still very skeptical that everything needs to be a blockchain thing.
For me, that's the big problem. I mean, it's not that blockchain doesn't represent a lot of advancements that are important for us and potentially solves a lot of problems, but in the end, it's just creating a host of new problems. And if it's just another currency in the end that requires human intervention and security on top of this system, it's not really solving any problems in the end that are tangible to us. I mean, we should
be clear about blockchain versus cryptocurrencies, which are just a use for the blockchain.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. I mean, it's from a standpoint of, let's take voting, for instance, since we're talking about voting. With voting, you already have to have real life inspectors. You already have to have verifications of records. You can't just leave that up to some user created, user monitored Wild West system and trust that it's going to work. Not to mention the biggest problem with the blockchain, which is that the technology, we really don't know what kind of backdoors may have been put in or may not have been put in, because it was created as an open source solution. Obviously a lot of experts, swear up and down that it's safe, but how safe do we really know it is? And I don't mean to be alarmist here, because I've been nothing but an advocate for the blockchain. But this article has really made me think again about how I'm perceiving the blockchain and whether or not it's a smart solution to put in play to solve all the world's problems. I don't think that it is.
Yeah.
I think that we need to be more careful and judicious about it.
Sorry. That article was, it felt like it came from the place of somebody who is struggling, is hearing every day from people who think that it is a solution for everything. And so I can understand that it came down a little hard, but, and it did sort of strive to make everybody question whether it was this, this golden ticket that everybody thinks, a lot of people think that it is. And philosophically, I think that it is an evolution of the way that we record and transact. And I think that is important. I also think it is still very early days, and some of the massive problems that we had in fraud and hacking and vulnerability and general instability, many systems that we've seen come, into daily use, in the last 30 years that we've all, had grown up with, they become stable over time. And I think it's a leap forward. I do. I think that it's definitely different enough than what we already have, but it's still vulnerable to the same issues that we have with many other systems, the existing banking system, existing security systems.
Ian, I haven't really talked to you about this offline, so I'm not really sure how comfortable you are on the subject of blockchain and how knowledgeable you are on the subject. But what's your thoughts here? Are there some legitimate use cases that mitigate the problems? Are there do the positives of the blockchain outweigh the negatives that we're talking about here?
Well, let's start with this. I think I've become more knowledgeable on the subject as a result of being on this BeanCast today. Because
I'm glad. At least I'm providing a service.
An interesting perspective for me, it's become, in the world of marketing agencies, it's one of those things that everyone feels they have to drop into conversations. I mean, agencies are talking about it as something that will empower so much of what we do, especially in the ad trading, ad buying space. So, I get exposed to it more in that environment. And of course, everyone's burning curiosities about cybercurrency and where that's going. The points that Howard and Michelle have both brought up regarding, these are the early days. I think there's a lot of exuberance now around blockchain, treating it as something that is more advanced and bulletproofed than it actually is. And I think if we recognize there's more that will be exposed, that we'll learn from, there's going to be a 2.0 and a 3.0, just like there has been with every major step forward in technology. And we would just be foolhardy to look at it as, flawless because it's controlled by computers and robots. I mean, Bob, as you pointed out, and really almost all tech platforms at least begin with a very significant human component. That's what we're seeing. It's neither a cause for alarm or a cause to quite, rest on anyone's laurels at this point.
It's a fascinating discussion, and you're right. I mean, every time I open up this subject on the show, it feels like a slow stumble into lucidity in terms of our understanding of the blockchain. I mean, so few of us really understand the implications of it, and I think a lot of the enthusiasts out there, especially in the marketing world, are coming at it from a periphery. They're coming at it from a standpoint of like, this is really cool, and trusting that the technology, because people tell them that it's safe and it's verifying that, it must be a true solution to a host of problems in terms of verification and trust and identity. But there are some significant questions, and I think that means not to throw all this out and say, no, it's not safe. It's more about, we got to be careful about the implementations and judicious about how we employ it. Howard, any last thoughts in terms of how you would use a blockchain solution? I mean, are there use cases that mitigate the problems?
Sure.
What would you say?
I was spending a little time today on IBM's website, and they're looking at things like financial applications, supply chain applications, and identity applications. And I've seen, from the nonprofit world, I've seen things like using blockchain related identification to identify refugees in camps, give them currency to be able to spend in the camps to obtain food and other needed services. And if you get moved to another camp, because typically these people by definition are homeless, which is just horrible, they actually can take their stuff with them. And if they happen to move across a border, they still have a currency that works for them. And in that situation, it's a very, very good and useful thing. Do I think that that's bulletproof, or do I think that that's 100% secure? Or what if you forget your password? I'm really not sure of the full implementation details, but I'm willing to suspend disbelief and think that people are going to come up with good, usable solutions for this, because there's a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of effort being put into this. I just think that we don't need to say, okay, that's it. We don't have to develop anything else because everything's going to be on the blockchain going forward. And if I need an ice cream cone, I'm going to need to, get my ice cream cone from the blockchain. It's not going to happen. There's just, it's going to be a development, a 2.0, 3.0, just like Ian said, and we'll all get more used to it. And it'll be like, we'll be talking about TCP/IP 20, 30 years ago. Everything was on TCP/IP 20, 30 years ago. Now we don't think about the fact that all of our web traffic and all these things go on a protocol. It's just a protocol. We take it for granted. Blockchain will get to that point over the next couple of years, and it'll just be the base technology that we'll build on.
Well, we got to move on, and I'm going to talk next about virtual influencers. Seems almost like an oxymoron, but we'll get to that in just a minute. First, I've got a bittersweet ad read to do for you. Not just bitter because it's dark chocolate and not just sweet because it's chocolate. It's because this is my last ad that I'm going to be reading for Flava Naturals. And I want you all to pay attention to this because this is a truly amazing product. I have been impressed with it. I've loved eating it. I've loved testing it. I've loved doing the 10-day challenge. You know, the flavanol antioxidants in dark chocolate are great for you, and no one does chocolate better than our sponsors, Flava Naturals. Look, here are the facts, and I've said this before, but I want you to pay attention to this. Last read, you got to hear it. Science supports that the flavanols in dark chocolate benefit brain function. It's making you smarter. It develops your heart health. It's making you healthier. And it's increasing exercise performance. You get better output. But to get enough flavanols from your average dark chocolate to actually see these kinds of benefits, you'd likely have to eat 5 bars or more, which is not really helping your waistline. You don't want to be eating 5 chocolate bars a day. That's why I was so excited to discover this Flava Naturals system. One Flava Naturals bar made from ultra premium cocoa beans crams in the flavanol benefits of 5 typical dark chocolate bars at 1/5 the calories. And their sugar-free mix has the benefits of 9, count them 9 typical dark chocolate bars with even fewer calories. You put it all together, and I am feeling like this super strong brainiac. Now, they shipped me a bunch of the product. I've loved it. The bars are some of the best tasting chocolate bars I've ever had. They got this coffee one that's amazing. They got these pink sea salt ones that are delicious. No hyperbole, these things are amazing. And I took their 10-day challenge with their mix by just adding it into my morning cup of coffee, and I could immediately feel the benefits. Which brings me to the big opportunity for you. Now, my brain, my high-functioning chocolate-enhanced brain is telling me that you may want to try some delicious super chocolate as well. And if so, I can get you 20% off your entire order. So just go to FLAVANaturals.com. That's FlavaNaturals.com. Order a 10-day challenge packet, get some bars to try. Why not order an entire case for your office? Why not? I mean, it's just like if you're an office manager out there and you're listening, or if you know the office manager, or if you have a good relationship with them, get them to buy a whole case, a couple cases for the break room. And when you go to checkout, you just enter the offer code BOB, that's BOB, for a 20% discount off the entire order. But hurry, offer is going to end July 31st, so make sure you get that in at FlavaNaturals.com. I'll say the website one last time. That's FlavaNaturals.com, offer code BOB. Look, if chocolate is your weakness, let Flava Naturals be your strength. And we thank them very much for their support of our show. I am going to miss talking about chocolate every single week. This is just one of my favorite ads that I've done. I know I've said that every week that I've ran this ad, but these things are delicious. It's amazing. You gotta get a chocolate ad in the mix every once in a while. Well, influencer marketing is an undisputable champion among marketing tactics. Recommendations from people you trust simply carry more weight. We all know that. It's just common knowledge. But what about an Instagrammer who isn't even a real person? In an effort to get all the value from influencer marketing without any of the liabilities, and we know what they are when you have somebody that you're working with who does something foolish, brands are turning to 3D characters who look real but are completely controllable by the brand. My question, Ian, as a strategist, is whether an influencer is still an influencer when they are a branded fabrication. Isn't this just an ad and not an influencer, or am I missing something?
Well, like so many things, I think it goes down to how you use the word. There are certain words, Bob, like a word you were just using, chocolate, where if I say that word, everyone else gets something different in their head. One person may think chocolate bar, one person may think chocolate cake, one person may think chocolate Labrador Retriever, right? Uh, so this very precious definition of what is an influencer that somehow requires defense, that's lost on me. An influencer can be a celebrity who endorses a product openly on a paid basis. It can be somebody who cultivates a very organic following around their genuine opinions of brands or products or services. And by the way, fictional characters have been influencing purchases for decades upon decades. I think about seeing Chesterfield cigarette cartoon ads featuring Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble from the 1960s. So as long as you're not trying to pretend that it's something it isn't, it's a fictional character right now, not necessarily being the spokesperson for a brand, although I know Prada seems to have some sort of a relationship with a prominent virtual influencer right now. But the reality is these personas are fictional characters that may take the form of performance art. They may have strong political views, they may not. And in that respect makes them no more or less volatile than a quote unquote legitimate influencer or legitimate celebrity.
But
I think
let
the
me ask you. Let me
question
ask you
really
this.
is, yeah.
Let me ask you this, because what you're describing to me still sounds like a lot like an ad. An influencer. If we use the term influencer marketing as it was intended to be used, the way it was always sold to me, it's this authentic. It's this authentic recommendation coming from somebody who is influential among an audience. It may include some free product. It may include some monetary recompense for the recommendation, but it comes across as this authentic recommendation or endorsement from somebody who actually has an audience. And what I'm concerned about with this virtual influencer type market is whether or not this is a creation by the brand or whether or not this is just a virtual creation by a third party who has real life opinions and is putting forward real life types. I don't know what I'm trying to say here. I mean, it really comes down to, is this a controllable branded asset, which makes it an ad, or is this something truly controlled by somebody outside the brand's control and is an authentic recommendation? And if it's the latter, it's influence. And if it's not, it's an ad. And I don't understand why we're even having this conversation if it is just a brand controlled asset.
Well, as you pointed out, sometimes it's an ad, sometimes it's somebody's creation. Look, how much do we know about Banksy as an actual human being, and Banksy as a performance art persona has a lot to say out there. I just see the lines as being very, very blurry. I think you always want to be aware of where you're taking your recommendations from. Look, if when a celebrity goes on a talk show and just happens to slip the name of a product into a funny story they're telling about something that happened to them on a plane, well, a lot of us know that that person was probably paid to drop that brand name into that story. That makes it no more or less legitimate, at least in my mind, because the fact is, there's got to be an element of let the buyer beware in all this. I mean, we're not talking about, when Walmart created fictitious bloggers a bunch of years ago and purported them to be real people.
Right.
And campers, right? They were going camping in places, right?
There was a family, there was a teenage girl. They had created a bunch of personas, and we're going back over a decade to when this happened. So as long as you're being authentic, nobody is looking at any of these virtual influencers, if you want to call them that, as being real people. They're to me a form of performance art. They do have a place in the commercial world. They don't take the place of uh, getting an opinion from somebody you trust.
What do you think, Howard? I mean, Ian's taking a laissez-faire type attitude, and I can totally see his point. Do you agree or do you disagree?
I think these virtual influencers are very much like Bitcoin. You know it's out there. You know it's got some value. You know the value can get artificially pumped up, but at some point that value is going to crash and someone's going to be left at a loss, right? What's going to crash the value of a virtual influencer? If you discover this one that you put out in the article was called Little Michaela, and apparently she's in favor of the Black Lives Matter movement. That's great, but a virtual influencer is never going to a protest. They're never going to get worried about being pulled over while driving or any other scenario that could actually happen to a real person in that scenario. And so she may be able to inspire others to go out and push for that cause. But if the brand behind her doesn't have credibility in the Black Lives Matter community, or worse, has negative credibility, at some point there's going to be a huge backlash. And putting that out there without knowing who's behind this virtual influencer is, to me, is super risky if you're going to put your brand behind that.
Yeah, there are a lot of positives I see in doing virtual influencers or working with virtual influencers, and the most obvious one is the fact that you don't have to worry about your virtual influencer going out and killing 3 people because they were drunk driving. I mean, you don't have to worry about that kind of association with somebody.
But what if the agency behind that virtual influencer goes out and does a campaign that's completely off your brand, and someone suddenly decides that it's a horrible idea?
Well, there's still real people behind it. It's a PR team, presumably, or an agency or something like that. So it's still fallible. People can still make mistakes. They can still put out the wrong message at the wrong time and upset particular niche audiences. I don't see that it reduces the risk.
Well, but it does reduce the risk to a certain extent. It reduces it to the level of any other ad. And that's why I'm saying this is more like advertising than it is about influencer marketing, because influencer marketing is a huge risk. You go out and you put product in the hands of somebody and you ask them to do something, but you really have no control over what they're saying or what they're doing. All you have is a little bit of dare I say, influence with the influencer, but you don't have any kind of real control. Whereas with any kind of ad program, some rogue employee can always tweet out something that you don't want them to tweet out. But essentially, there are processes of checks and balances in place with an ad program, with creative, to make sure that the message is on target and on brand and effectively achieving the objectives that the ad campaign comes out with. And that's what this sounds like. It sounds like brands exerting control. And if that's the case, I mean, that's fine. This is a perfectly legitimate tactic, but why are we even calling it influencer marketing? Why even bother to do that? That sounds like smoke and mirrors, and it sounds like we're trying to dupe brands we're trying to dupe people into believing that this is truly the same thing as influencer marketing when it's not. It's the brand not taking the risk.
Influencer marketing is the flavor of the month, Bob.
I know.
But also, influencer marketing is a lot more structured, I think, in many cases, not in all, than perhaps you would think on the surface, based primarily on some of the early definitions of it and how it originated.
It's being characterized as influencer marketing largely because these personas are using Instagram.
Yeah.
And that's a place where people cultivate and monetize social influence. But that doesn't necessarily mean these people are influential versus just, one thing we've seen consistently is there is little to no correlation between liking social media content, whether it comes from a brand or from an individual, and acting on it commercially. So just because we see, a bunch of followers or likes doesn't necessarily mean anyone's making money off it yet. We don't really know. It's almost to me like the definition of an influencer is you've got to be influencing somebody. And at this point, I haven't seen a case presented that show these characters wield actual influence. To me, I'm still treating them like performance art until it proves otherwise.
But there have been cases of influencer marketing actually delivering results on a program, especially when you're talking about direct marketing results. You give someone an offer code, you say specifically that
absolutely.
Yeah, so I mean,
I'm sorry, I was speaking specifically to these virtual influencers.
Oh, okay.
I haven't seen a business case proving out their value. No, I'm a big fan of influencer marketing. I was one of the first to help get brands into it. I hate the extent to which it's losing authenticity out there because they think more and more consumers have become aware.
And that's my big problem.
Marketplace.
That element of losing legitimacy is what I'm most taking offense at when people call a virtual creation an influencer. I mean, it's okay to say this is our virtual Instagram personality, and we're going to use this virtual Instagram personality to promote our product, or we're going to use someone else's virtual personality to promote our product, but it's still just a promotion. It's not really an influencer. And by calling it an influencer, we're just continuing to basically denigrate this very effective means by watering it down, this very effective means of marketing by watering it down with a virtual creation. It doesn't make any sense, and it feels like smoke and mirrors. Howard, am I overreacting?
No, I think you're spot on, Bob. This is this is one of those things where sort of metaphors are mixing or conflicting with each other, right? There's this idea of influencers, and certainly there are influencers. These, for every DJ Khaled and Kim Kardashian, you also have people who are influential in their niches and who are actually working with brands in B2B or B2C spaces, and they're doing good things for those brands and potentially for themselves as well. And they're disclosing and doing all the things that the FTC wants you to do. Great. But to call these virtual characters influencers versus what they are, which I think you're being clear about, as they are themselves ads. And we should, as marketers, be clear about that so that we're not confusing clients and others who might get confused by the terminology.
Agreed. I wholeheartedly agree. Well, moving on, at their big I/O conference, Google showcased the next generation of their voice assistant that could actually manage complete conversations with real people to do things like set up a restaurant reservation over the phone. If you haven't watched the video, it's well worth your time. It's a pretty cool use of the technology, yet at the same time, pretty darn creepy. What I wonder, Michelle, is whether brands should be looking to take advantage of this tech or playing things a bit more cautiously, at least at the onset, with basically virtual assistants carrying on conversations with real people who may not know that they're carrying on conversations with virtual assistants.
I love the videos. I think that they were really great. It's a little creepy when they're saying we've programmed them to, be able to have human reactions, like say, things like that we don't necessarily associate with bots, which is pretty cool. Should brands be jumping on board? I think that brands already use bots in so many cases that we are probably not aware of already, from a lot of initial chats that we do on websites and customer service to I'm assuming, automated phone systems and things like that. And this is a little more creepy because we're hearing it with a voice. But it was pretty impressive. The scenarios that they gave, the restaurant booking and the making a hairdressing, haircut appointment, were very relatable. I think that they picked those two because it's quite easy to see. Like I was saying before we started this call, I would very much like to take some of this busy work off my plate during the day. I'm very excited to see how this goes, because if I can get a virtual assistant to do some of these appointment making things for me, it would be great. It's something that brands should definitely be looking at. I'm a huge advocate of using bots on sites. We've actually talked about this on previous BeanCasts.
Yeah, I mean, I
Taking some of the heavy lifting, out of some real people in some cases where it makes sense.
I just wrote a whole article to blow out a comment that a discussion we had on a show a couple shows back about voice. And it was all about how brands should have their own voice, that we're giving away all the brand value of putting skills on Alexa to Alexa and Amazon by putting it in her voice as opposed to putting it in the brand's voice. And for me, I'm looking at this and I'm saying this completely enables that kind of technology. This is the kind of thing that really elevates the experience of interacting with a brand online into a relationship that could be meaningful and powerful. I mean, think about it. When you walk up behind a friend and you say, it's me, they know who you are because of the tenor and the emotion and the cadence of your rhythm and all these vocal qualities.
It makes it enjoyable too.
Right.
Like giving personality to a bot, whether it's written or verbal, is something that I talk a lot about when I'm workshopping this stuff with creative teams. It's one of the first tips that I provide to creative teams. Give something a personality. If you are going to can it, if you are going to have this logic tree that you're going to ask somebody to interact with, messenger bot or voice bot, whatever it might be, give it a personality, because we immediately become more interested. We immediately become more forgiving when there are issues. If we think we're talking to a personality rather than a literal robot or a bot.
And yet at the same time,
enjoyable.
At the same time, I like the idea of personality. I like the idea of having a distinctive voice that people can relate to, but I don't agree with situations where this voice doesn't self-identify. I think that you need
when you don't know it's a bot.
Right.
This is raising a lot of questions.
Right,
yes,
absolutely.
Absolutely.
And as a brand,
I'm talking about branded activations. I think it's fantastic. I think it's something we should all be playing with and trying. But you're right. When we don't know that we're talking to a bot, I mean, we inherently hate getting those canned phone calls, right, where it's a pre-recorded script to intro you to somebody. But that's not listening to you. That's not tricking you into thinking it's a real person. That's your dad making a stupid voicemail message, and it's something like that, right? We know immediately it's pre-canned. But I would feel very uncomfortable if I was led down a path by a brand, certainly, where I didn't realize that it was a bot. That's a breach of trust for sure. I mean,
I do think it's an easy enough thing to disclose.
Oh, for sure.
I think it's something that brands will have to disclose going forward. My rule on creepy, and look, the reality is what I do for a living is use data and technology to create customer experiences. So the creep factor is always, at the very least, bubbling just below the surface. My rule of thumb is it's not creepy if it's helpful. And that's not just my opinion as a marketer. That's actually the voice of the customer reflected back consistently. If you've used technology and you've used data, you've used artificial intelligence in such a way that it makes my life easier or better, or gives me a faster, more fun way to do something that I've traditionally done in the old model, then people don't mind the bit of the creep. They don't mind the use of their personal permission data. It's really a matter of being helpful and being honest. Yes, disclosure is absolutely going to be important, but the more helpful these types of voice bots become, and Bob, I absolutely love your idea that brands need to develop their own voice the way they have a logo and a musical sting. That
absolutely.
Just, as a brand marketer, makes all the sense in the world. But people are going to get a lot more comfortable with this the more they see it solving problems for them.
Well, if you want to read the article, or anybody wants to read the article, it's on Medium, and I also put it on my blog on my website. So definitely check it out. But we got to move on to the last topic real quick before we run out of time. Finally, I want to talk about this. Clout announced on Twitter that they will be. And remember Clout with a K? You know, those of you maybe you're too young to remember Clout, but Clout announced on
Oh, I
Twitter.
remember Clout. Yeah.
Clout announced on Twitter that they will be shutting down at the end of the month. Howard, there was so much buzz around this social reputation engine when it first launched. Where did they ultimately go wrong?
You know, Bob, as the person with the highest clout score on this podcast, I'm glad you asked me.
I'm glad that you know that.
Really, my clout score is way higher than yours. So no, seriously, it's crazy. But you do have one of the top 0.1% of people in social media and one of the top 0.1% of people in advertising and marketing influence on this call. Advertising, marketing being Ian, and social media being myself. But I always thought clout was an interesting idea with a flawed premise about how to capture influence at the start. And they did try to evolve it, but it was never really anything other than a number that no one could really make sense of. I mean, if you remember, at some point, your clout score could get you like a free hotel room or prizes.
Oh, let me caveat that. No, Howard, let me caveat that. If you were in the top like 1 percentile, like if you were like 95 or above on your clout score, then you got free stuff like hotel rooms and cars and everything. Everybody else from 94 down got free burgers at McDonald's. I mean, it was just completely ludicrous.
What do you mean you won't give me my free drinks? Do you know what my clout score is?
I know.
I mean, there. You know, it's funny though. You know, the fact that Bob has a lower clout score than I do on things like marketing is just a joke. Bob's been doing a podcast for more than 9 years, and I stopped writing about marketing topics for Inc. 4 years ago. So that's just sort of laughable. They didn't follow this up in the way that they're going. There are companies that are trying to track the level of influence of an influencer, but they're taking data now from both the senders and the people who receive that information. People, companies like Hyper Brands, Little Bird, before it was bought for Sprinkler. I don't know what they're doing these days. They did different kinds of tracking, and frankly, it makes sense for marketers or brands to try to understand who has influence, why, and on what topics. But clout, I just don't think they found the magic combination of those factors that determine influence in a way that keeps it justified to continue running.
Ian,
there isn't a one-stop shop. Oh, sorry. Yeah,
no, go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah,
Michelle,
you're
go
absolutely
for it.
right. There are multiple different tools, you know. In some cases, like even with picking influencers now, there are a couple of really great networks that you can, if you want to become an influencer, a paid influencer, you can sign up to, and they almost give you like a portfolio site, like a Behance sort of site, you know, for yourself as an influencer. It doesn't just plug in your numbers of followers. It allows you to sort of show your reach and show some of the work that you've done, which is really great. And you're right, you know, like systems like Sprinkler and many of those other social media management tools have acquired different like listening and reputation and sentiment analysis and influence of individual people and bundled them up into their platform. But we never just use one, you know. And I think with Clout, it gave you a score, and I'm sure that there were some other tools that it included as well, but it was never going to be, it was going to always be one out of many tools that we would use. And after a while, I think it sort of became a parody of itself.
Well, it did. And the mystery behind it, I think, really, there was just no authenticity, right? I think a lot of us, when Cloud first launched, thought, oh my God, this is great, all in one place. But then the more you realize that the algorithm was just something to be gamed, it wasn't actually, you know, to Howard's point, a measure of how influential somebody was in a certain sphere. I got to be honest, I have no idea what my clout score is. I haven't looked at it.
Your clout score is 52, and you're influential, by the way, about as well as television, iOS, football, cybersecurity, comedy, and celebrities, Ian, in addition to things like advertising and marketing. So,
do me next. Do me next.
Okay.
It's still live.
No influence over shoes tells you that this is flawed.
Oh my gosh. Well,
you never say I didn't do the research, Bob.
I know. This is fantastic. Well, Ian, one last thought from you. I mean, obviously you're doing a lot of influencer programs, or at least you've been active in creating influencer programs on behalf of brands. I think Clout was there to give advertisers the opportunity to see who was the most influential and give them a cheat sheet on who to actually connect with in the community. That was ultimately the business model.
That's right, almost like a Q score.
So obviously, influencer programs are still getting done without Clout. How are you getting it done, and why was Clout not a consideration in terms of actually choosing an influencer for any programs that you did?
Well, Clout never clearly presented itself as a connection to monetizing an influencer base. It's this odd compendium that seems to put a lot of emphasis on Twitter and puts equal, when Twitter was up, when Twitter was down, it seemed like the influence on the Clout score was the same. So there was never anything there that we could use to understand the value of either a large influencer base, or more and more we're dealing with micro influencers, where something like this score that compares you to the rest of the universe is really not as interesting as how influential you are among, for example, nursing students in the Southeast, right? I'm just picking a random. So I think Clout was never authentic or relevant enough, and you could never follow a thread to the money.
My favorite Clout story was always the fact that I knew somebody who was a social media wonk online, and she came online one day and said, I know Clout doesn't work because my social media clout is bigger than Oprah's. And I'm just like, when you know that a person with 3,000 followers from Minnesota has a higher Clout score than Oprah Winfrey, you know that the system is broken, fundamentally flawed. Well, with that,
at the very least, Clout should have been spelled with a lowercase k at that point.
Well, it's time for the Ad Fail 5, but before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Ian Baer. You can find him at rauxa.com. That's RAUXA.com. Really cool name. I always forget where that came from, but I'm sure you'll tell us. Tell us what's going on in your world, Ian. What would you like to promote?
Well, I'll start by answering your question. Catalan for madness. That is the meaning of Roxa. So it's kind of perfect. Love that our founder came up with that name 19 years ago. I'm actually going to use my shameless plug to shamelessly plug two of our clients who are both in the not-for-profit space and celebrating extraordinary anniversaries this year. It's the 25th anniversary of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. It's also the 65th anniversary of Keep America Beautiful, who most people know for creating one of the most iconic TV ads in history back in the 70s. And
Crying
we've
Indian.
got
The Weeping
their new.
Indian.
I'm sorry?
The Weeping Native American?
Correct. Yeah, the politically incorrect name, the Crying Indian. So we are actually now in post-production on the 65th anniversary PSA, and really it's the next national PSA campaign to follow in those footsteps. And it's such an amazing cause because it's all about cleaning up the parks and beaches and playgrounds that our families use every day. And so I'm super proud of the work we're doing to support those causes and wishing them well on their anniversaries.
I think the funniest thing about that ad is that the Native American featured in that ad was not a Native American. It's just like, although he was accepted by the Native American community, he was not Native American, which I think is hysterical.
I believe he's actually Italian American.
I think he was. Now, next up, Michelle Excell. You can find her at the Antipodean.us. I'm not going to spell it for you. You can find it on the website. Tell us what's going on in your world, Michelle. What would you like to promote?
I have been going to so many conferences around immersive technology recently, and I finally also settled upon using the term immersive technology when talking about AR, VR, MR, XR, all of that sort of stuff. So I'm hoping to be speaking, not confirmed yet, but I will let everybody know if I do. So follow me on LinkedIn, find me on LinkedIn under Michelle Excell at a couple of the VRX conferences coming up soon. My focus recently has been around helping companies, brands, and agencies to understand the value of immersive technology and try and find that first pilot project to get them going. Because typically once people start to work in it, then they see its transformative capabilities. And I'm a really big advocate of AR, VR in the right cases. And we're doing some incredible work in volumetric right now, video and in an AR and just some really, really cool things. So I would love to talk to anyone and everybody around how we can find something meaningful for you to start in that first project or to change what you're already doing, because I've got some amazing partners that I work with.
And Michelle is a lovely person to do business with, so you definitely want to reach out to her and work with her, so give her a call. Last but not least, we have Howard Greenstein. You can find him at harbrook.com. That's the website I have for you. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
That works. That continues to work. So I'm privileged to be speaking and also part of the team running the Propellify Innovation Festival in Hoboken, New Jersey on May 17th, which is this coming Thursday, based on the day that we're recording this podcast. And as a member of the team, I get to offer all the BeanCast listeners a $99 ticket for free. That's absolutely $0. Use code BeanCast18, capital B, capital C, 18. When you're checking out for the Propellify Festival. It's all day on the Hoboken waterfront this Thursday, May 17th. And the weather report, knock wood, keeps getting better. And in previous years, it's been a beautiful day to spend looking at New York City in the background while learning a great deal about innovation, entrepreneurship, and everything from having drone races with your friends to meeting other influencers and other people who are creating companies and who are doing innovative stuff in corporations. A lot of marketing, a lot of some VR, some AR, some AI kind of stuff happening this year. And I'm excited to be on a panel talking about the future of people, like an HR, moderating an HR panel with some HR leaders who are some really amazing women. So I'm looking forward to this, and I hope that you'll join me there.
Oh, that sounds great. And for those of you in Manhattan, it's steps away from the dock, so it's easy to get to.
The ferry or the PATH train will take you right there within 15 minutes. It's pretty amazing.
As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. You can even find out how to advertise on the program, so check it all out at thebeancast.com. Don't forget, transcribeme.com/beancast will give you a special offer because they are our official transcription partner. Yes, we offer transcriptions now, so definitely check them out and offer them your help. And if you're in Manhattan next 2 weeks from now, Wednesday the 23rd, doing an event with FreshBooks here in the city. Would love for you to check it out. Definitely reach out to me if you want more information. I'll hook you up with a registration code. But now it's time for the AdFail 5, a rundown of the lowest moments in advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. And first up, Rudy Giuliani continued his campaign to completely screw up the White House PR messaging as if they needed any help with that. First claiming on national television that Trump scuttled the AT&T merger with Time Warner, and then walked that back, Ian, when he apparently realized how illegal that action by a sitting president would be.
Right.
I'm just like...
Well, first of all, I love that our president is explaining all of Giuliani's outbursts as, he really doesn't know what he's doing yet. Like, okay, at what point, after how many positions of national influence, will he know what he's doing? I don't know how much to say about Rudy. I'm going to try to leave my personal politics out of this, but have you noticed physically he's starting to resemble Nosferatu?
I know, everybody's been doing that recently. That's pretty funny. Well, I want to go to our next one. Google announced new functionality for its clip cameras, saying it would be better at automatically taking pictures of special moments, Michelle, like kissing. So when you're kissing someone in the future, all you have to do is know that your camera is taking pictures of it. I guess if you're a cheater, you've been warned, right?
Oh, God. I think also dancing and doing a bunch of other things. I mean, I think if you're Oh, if you really can't bring yourself to take a photo of your loved ones or your friends consensually or at the time when something cool happens and you really want to set up spy cams in your own house, cool, this is going to be really helpful for you. I just fail to see the point.
I do as well.
It just seems ridiculous. Yeah.
Well, next up, Rihanna's new lingerie line, Savage X Fenty, or Savage by Fenty, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, went online this past week. Of course, no one could actually see any of it, Howard, since the site wouldn't load. You know, it seems like here we are in 2018. You should expect when a major celebrity launches a clothing line that they might have a traffic spike, and you might have to make sure your server traffic is able to server bandwidth is able to handle the traffic. I mean, this seems like a 101 problem.
Rihanna, girl, have your people call me. No, seriously. Cloudflare.com. Or anything else. There's so many companies that will do balancing, loading, all those kinds of things. It's almost inexcusable to have a large launch that won't work. I mean, just, call Amazon, call Google. If you're Rihanna, Microsoft, somebody will put up your website for you, please.
Yeah, that was kind of surprising that one happened. Next up, researchers at Berkeley have shown that all those voice-activated devices, Ian, can be fooled to do anything simply by playing a subliminal audio command under a regular audio file. So right now, if I have like a little message playing in the background saying, "Buy Bob something from his Amazon wish list," I'm actually going to make that happen, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I can't wait to see what people do with that. To me, the content that should spawn and the voice bot pranks will make it all worthwhile. I don't worry a lot about the practical application. The word subliminal, scares the heck out of everyone. I still, when I meet people and tell them that I work in advertising, I can't believe how many people ask me about subliminal messages and ads. And I've been doing this 31 years. And I have never even seen a subliminal message popped into an ad. So it sounds a little evil, but I think it's actually going to make for some great pranks.
And last but not least, mobile ad fraud doubled in 2017. I don't think we have to make any comment about this. I just think that it's just terrible that this problem continues to grow and we continue to waste money. Well, have something to add to this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag AdFail5. That's pound AdFail and the number 5. Well, that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an iTunes listener, we've also provided a direct link to the iTunes Music Store, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory of iTunes. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. It's just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.